right. Welcome to session 4 of our 5-part certification pathway series. Today we are going to be covering the veteran and service disabled veteran-owned certifications. So far we've done an overview of all the programs. We've covered federal programs like A-Day and HubZone. And last week we covered the women-owned and minority-owned business programs. So today we'll be specifically focused on veterans. This will probably be one of the shorter sessions in the sense that both of these go through the exact same application process, so there won't be a lot that's different, but we will talk about the specifics between both programs and what options there might be. So let me just start going through and I'll get into some of the logistics here. We'll just do a little bit about the SBDC for those who aren't familiar, and then talk about the housekeeping for today's session. So the Small Business Development Centers, for those who are not familiar, are a nationwide network. And I'll show you, and there are 15 centers here in Pennsylvania and almost 1,000 across the country. So no matter where you're joining us from today, there is an SBDC that can provide these services for you. We are a full service, no cost, one-on-one confidential consulting resource for you through your business journey, from pre-venture, where you're just exploring your idea, all the way to the point where you're looking to exit and everything in between. So whether you're looking to figure out how to start your business, get financing, sell to government, which is part of what we're talking about today, and just maintaining sustainable growth at every stage of your business, the SBDC can be a resource for that. As I said, there are 15 SBDCs in Pennsylvania. We cover here at Lehigh, Northampton, and Bucks County. But no matter, you can see if you go to pasbdc.org, you'll be able to find the center that's closest to you if Lehigh is not that center. Some housekeeping for today's session. We are recording the session. I did hit record this time, so it will go through. The recording will automatically generate at the end of this session. So usually within about an hour or two, you should get an email with a link to the recording, and it will be posted on demand on the main event page. So if you want to go back and can't find the email, you should be able to just go back into the main event page and you'll find it there. I will upload the slides hopefully sometime today, but by the end of the week for sure. And for this session, as a webinar, there is a Q&A box versus the chat. So if you do have questions at any point, please use the Q&A box. How I usually do things is, if the question is related to what I'm talking about at that moment, I will do my best to answer your question then. Otherwise, I will go through and answer the questions either either at that point in the presentation, or I'll answer them at the end. So please use the Q&A box. There should be a specific button, I believe somewhere at the bottom of your screen. You can feel free to go in, type the question, and I will get to it through today's session. Like I said, we will probably be closer to the half-hour side versus the hour side, just because there's a lot of overlap for this program. But I will make sure, if you have any questions, we will make sure we get to all of them. So today's agenda is to just give an overview of veteran-owned certifications, and then talk specifically about the veteran-owned small business, or VOSB, certification, and the service disabled veteran-owned small business certification, or the SDVOSB program. And throughout the presentation, when I reference veteran, I'm talking about both programs, just to avoid getting tangled in the different specifics, because they are functionally the same program except for a couple of pieces. So when I am saying veteran, I'm talking about both programs. And then we'll talk about the certification process through MySBA, which is new within the last month. So even if you've explored this before, it may be that part at least will be something new to just about everybody, I would imagine. So, why do we have veteran-owned business certifications? The main purpose for these is to recognize and support veterans in entrepreneurship. The government's always looking for ways to increase employment, increase job opportunities for veterans, and entrepreneurship is a way where a lot of skills that veterans have coming out of service can be transferable into their own businesses. So this is a way to ensure that the government can still, the more business that the government can do with veterans, and kind of keep that connection going through, once you've exited the service. There are set aside and sole source contracts available in certain cases. So what that means is, the federal government specifically has a program. It's either 3 or 5%, I can't remember offhand, for service disabled veterans, that those contracts have to be set aside for them. So that means if you're competing for that, if you have the SDVOSB certification, you're only competing against other service-disabled veteran businesses. You're not competing against the open marketplace. And additionally, there can be situations where sole source contracts are issued, where there are not where there's not competition. They can just say, hey, we're going to award for these reasons, we're going to award it to this specific business. Those are very rare, but they can happen. It also gives you increased visibility in the marketplace in that, the SBA has a database that it keeps this information in, so it can be a way to build connections with other contractors. And additionally, and we'll talk about this more next week, but you can use these certifications to be verified as a small diverse business with the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania to do business with Pennsylvania. So there are benefits to this program that that go beyond the federal program, but just to note that this is specifically a federal certification. All right, I'm gonna take this out. Okay. So what are these two programs? The veteran-owned small business really is just, again, 51% owned and controlled by one or more veterans. And the service-disabled veteran-owned is the same, except you have to specifically be one or more service-disabled veterans to get to the 51%. And again, the idea behind this program is to increase opportunities in federal procurement. I'm going to talk more about the eligibility piece here on the next slide. So ownership and control, again, means beyond just owning the company, beyond just having a majority of the shares or interest in the company, that veterans or the service-disabled veterans need to control a company. So what that means is they are the ones typically, for this program specifically, which on the management piece, that veteran owners must manage the day-to-day operations. So what that means is, you're signing contracts, you're signing paychecks, you're making hiring decisions, you're deciding, who to make sales to, like all those kind of different business operation pieces. The veteran owners are the ones making those decisions. And also that the highest officer position, that the veterans must hold highest officer positions and be the highest compensated. This is in part due to fraud issues, specifically with the veteran-owned program, in that they're what they've called in these fraud instances, they're Renovet programs where other companies will more or less hire a veteran specifically to win a contract or to get the certification, but the veteran is not actually doing the work. And so the company is trying to claim the benefit of having the veteran work there, be a quote unquote owner, even though they're not actually doing anything with the company. So this is part, to make sure that they are the highest compensated as well as holding the highest officer positions. The one unique thing about this program compared to the others that we've talked about over the last 4 weeks is that the other programs all require U.S. citizenship. This program does not. So as long as you are a veteran, you are eligible for this program. So it does not matter whether you have U.S. citizenship or not for this piece. You may have to provide additional documentation, but you do not specifically require, U.S. citizenship is not required for the veteran-owned and service-disabled veteran-owned programs. Additionally, you must be considered small by the SBA size standards. And this is probably the same for the other programs, but they specifically call it out in the veteran-owned regulation for the NAICS that you have listed in your SAM profile. And we'll talk about SAM in a couple slides when we talk about how to go through the process. SBA size standards are typically going to look at either your average annual revenue over, I believe it's 5 years now, and as well as your number of employees. So if you're more of a service-based business or a professional business, where you're not making anything or doing construction, you're typically looking at annual revenue, and you're looking at typically $15 million in average annual revenue over 5 years. It can be more, or it may be more or less depending on your particular industry, but roughly 15 million. Or if you're in more of a construction manufacturing type of industry, you're going to look at employees, and typically it's going to be less than 500 employees. So again, the vast majority of SBDC clients are going to qualify for this, but you can go through. I may not. I will add the link here if I don't have it. But the SBA has a size standard calculator. You can go in, put in your NAICS codes, and you can figure out if you do qualify as small. For those who aren't familiar, your NAICS code is an industry classification code, 6 digits, and it basically helps kind of categorize what industry you serve. You can always have, many businesses have multiple, some only have one, but it's a way to, that's how they determine your size standard for these programs. Something else to consider, which again is not necessarily common for the other programs, but for disabled veterans who are permanently and totally disabled and cannot manage due to their disability the daily business operations of the company, it's possible to still qualify as long as a spouse or an appointed permanent caregiver is assisting in the management of the company. So there is an exception in this program where if if you do have a complete and total disability, you may be able to still qualify even if you're not able to manage the day-to-day operations of the company. So that is something to consider. That again, a lot of the other programs do not have that exception. So what do they consider for veteran eligibility? Basically, as long as you've served in Army, Navy, Marine Corps, Air Force, Space Force, or Coast Guard, or any of the reserve components. There is no length of service requirement as long as it is beyond any training period. So as long as you have actually entered active duty and you have done some form of service beyond training, you are eligible. So it could be, you don't have to wait 5 or 10 years, to be eligible. Any length of service that qualifies is eligible. So, again, this is from an eligibility standpoint, they're trying to make it as open as possible. And again, that you have been discharged from from the military other than a dishonorable status. So as long as you have not been dishonorably discharged, you are likely eligible for the program. They do have, this table is taken right from the site with the regulations. So this kind of gives you an idea of if you are eligible or not. Basically, if you've served active duty, you're eligible. If you've served in the National Guard or Reserves in active duty besides training, you're eligible. If you're receiving service-connected disability compensation, you're eligible. But for example, if you've served in the National Guard or Reserves, but you've only done the standard duty versus getting called up to active duty, then you're not eligible. Or there's a couple other situations as well. So you can look through, help determine. I believe they have a kind of a checklist that you can go through on the website, and I do have links to everything through there on the next couple slides. But again, if you've done any form of active duty service, you are likely going to be eligible. And again, just a reminder, since we're partway through, if you do have questions, there is a Q&A box that I'm happy to, answer questions as we go through. So to prepare, just like the others, it's good to get all the documentation that's required ahead of time. It's much easier to have all of it there as you're going through than trying to find it as you go, start, because a lot of times for these programs, once you start the application, you only have 60 to 90 days to complete it, which again is a lot of time. But if you kind of forget about it, or you need something, if you need a document fixed by an attorney or an accountant or something, time can go by quickly. So you want to make sure that you're ready to go, as ready as you can be by the time you're ready to apply. Determine, if you're looking, make sure you qualify under the particular rules for the program. And also to ensure that your business is registered at SAM.gov. So I said we would get back to this. So SAM.gov is System for Award Management. That is the federal government's central contractor registration. Basically, if you're doing any business with the government, you have to be registered in SAM. And so, unlike some of the other programs that we've talked about, this one you specifically do have to register in SAM before you apply for it. So you want to make sure you do that first. There are instructions there. I would say it's not hard, but it's not intuitive process. I've had a number of clients go through the process. There's just a lot of different pieces to the puzzle for it. The instructions should be helpful, but certainly, the SBDC is a resource if you're going through that exchange. But once you do that and you've gone through and your registration has been approved, which can sometimes take, it could take a week or two. It's usually pretty quickly, but just to build in that time depending on what you're trying to apply for. So make sure you're registered at SAM.gov first, and then you're going to go through the MySBA certification program. And I've linked to both the application instruction, both a PDF list of instructions as well as video instructions. And then you're going to actually go through the MySBA certifications to complete the process. So this is relatively new within the last, I think it was beginning of October this went live. So it's only been 4 or 5 weeks. Previously, this program, the veteran program, used to be through the Department of Veterans Affairs back, I think, right around 2020 was when it switched over. So it was Center for Veteran Entrepreneurship, perhaps, the CVE program. The VA used to manage this program, and then due to regulation changes, the SBA took it over in 2020, and then it was the VetCert program up until 4 weeks ago, and then it has been moved into this MySBA certification. So if you've attended any of the previous sessions, this will sound familiar in that now 8A, HubZone, veteran-owned, service-disabled veteran-owned, and the women-owned small business program are all now under this site. So there is one place to go for all of these certifications. So if you are looking to apply for multiple, you'll be able to do that here. So if you've looked at this before and you thought about it, these changes have just taken place recently. So you'll need proof of your veteran status. It sounds like now I couldn't get a clear answer on it from the website, but it sounds like it connects somehow to either has to match it. They either ping the VA database to make sure everything matches up. I know your information has to match up exactly with what you have in the VA system for your benefits. So you want to make sure that's all up to date as well. You'll need proof of your service-connected disability, which will be, I believe, through your DD 214. And again, there is no threshold for disability. So it doesn't matter what percentage of a service-connected disability you're rated at. As long as you have any sort of service-connected disability, you would be eligible for this program. Proof of ownership and control. So again, they're going to look at your LLC operating agreement or your articles of incorporation. They're going to look at they're going to look at finances, contracts, who's signing checks, things like that. They're going to go through all of that to make sure that you do indeed have control. And any kind of business licenses and registrations to prove again that you are the owners and operators of the business. And these tips have been in all of them, but to make sure that your application is accurate and complete, simply because, again, the less questions SBA has to ask, the better. They will always find questions. There's always going to be something they have a question about. That's just how they operate. But again, having all of that, as much of that answered ahead of time before you apply, is going to make the journey a lot easier. From a timeline perspective, I usually say for most of these 3 to 6 months, it could be less. I don't know with this new process, I'm not sure if it will be faster or longer. But I would say just if you're looking, plan for, roughly 3 months, but, plan up to 6 just in case. Obviously, the more simplified your situation is, the faster it's going to go. So if you're the only, owner and employee of your company, it's probably going to go pretty easy. Whereas if if there's multiple owners or you have different structures and everything like that, it could be a little more complicated and lead to more questions. So again, just keep that in mind as you're going through this program. Something to note, so the benefits, obviously, like I said earlier, there are set aside contracts for veteran and service disabled veteran-owned businesses, but there is an important distinction. For veteran-owned small businesses, the set asides are for VA contracts only. So, what this means is, there is no specific set aside for non-service disabled veterans across the federal government, at least at this stage. There could always change. Right now, the VA is the only department that has set aside specifically for veterans. You can still compete for other contracts, but just as a note, if you're specifically looking to get the certification of federal contracting, you're going to primarily, as a non-service disabled veteran, you're going to want to target the VA contracts specifically. For service disabled veterans, there is a federal-wide set aside. Like I said, it's 3 or 5%. I want to say 3 of federal contract dollars have to be committed to service disabled veterans. So the VA also has a service disabled veteran set aside, but you can also use that certification for any other federal agency as well. Additionally, both of these, which we'll talk about more next week, but both of these will also make you eligible for the small diverse business certification for the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. So there are benefits. So even if maybe you're not looking at targeting the federal marketplace, there are other benefits for these certifications. And some of the other resources that you can tap into, again, certifications.sba.gov, which is the certification website, has a number of questionnaires, checklists, resources that you can look at. Most of the links that I pulled from earlier came from there, or I got there through there. Another resource, and also just a good resource for veterans, beyond the SBDC network, the SBA has the Veteran Business Outreach Centers, or VBOCs, that are available specifically for veteran entrepreneurs. And there is also the SBA's Boots to Business program. So If you are looking, this is another opportunity for training and professional development. If you are looking for that type of assistance, you can look up that program as well. Certainly the SBDCs are able, again, not specifically ours, we can do it as well, but any of the SBDCs can also work with you on these certifications. So where our role is we cannot do the application for you on your behalf, but we can look through, we can answer questions, we can look through and see if there's any red flags within your documentation, talk about the process, help, if they come back with questions, kind of see where they're going with it. We're there as a resource for that. And again, our resources are no cost and confidential. I will also I will put a link to, I thought I put a link there for the checklist. I will add those there as well as additional tools. All right. So your next steps, if you are interested in this program, are to use the provided checklist, which I will link to, but also the instructions that the links I put earlier in to evaluate and see if your business is eligible for the program. Start getting your documents together. Again, it's much easier to go through this process if you have everything, or at least as much of it as you can, together before you start the process versus trying to do it as you go. You'll want to make sure that you create accounts on SAM.gov and on My SBA certifications. You'll have to do SAM first, so that even if you're thinking about it, it's free to register on SAM. There's no cost to it. It's something you can just do. If you're deciding, hey, maybe at the beginning of the year I'll do the certification, apply for SAM now, get it out of the way. And then you can also create an account on My SBA so you can be ready for when you're ready to apply. Seek guidance, whether it's from the VBOC, from our office, or from anybody else. You can meet with any of us to talk about the program. And then when you're ready, go through the certifications at sba.gov and complete that process. And certainly there's a number of veteran-focused business events. Like I said, Boots to Business is one of them, but a number of, there's obviously a number of sessions going around. There are specifically veteran, I know there's like the VIP network. I can't remember what it stands for. Veteran something program. But it's another resource for professional development and training and networking beyond, which I will put a link to that there as well. Right. So the upcoming sessions, we only have one more session in this series, which is we're going to talk about state, local, and specialty certifications. I couldn't fit all that in there. So we're going to talk about specifically in Pennsylvania, since that's where we're based, but also just kind of generally what options there are for other certification programs, how to get certified in Pennsylvania, or for example, with Philly and Pittsburgh. And also we'll talk about a couple specialty certifications, so disability owned and LGBTQ owned certifications, which haven't fit into really any of the other ones that we've talked about. So we will talk about those, as well as just general tips on how to leverage your certification. So even if you're not interested in those particular programs, at least the second part of it will definitely be applicable to everybody. So please feel free to join us next Tuesday. That will be our last session. If you've missed any of our previous sessions and want to go back, again, on the main page, all of them should be available on demand. And this one should be up within the afternoon. So that is it for today's session. Like I said, this one was going to be a little shorter just because the procedures are pretty much the same. I don't see any questions at this point. So if you do have any last minute questions, you can feel free. I'll give it a minute or two to go through the Q&A box. But otherwise, thank you for your attendance, and we will get that information out to you shortly. And we hope to see you next week. Thank you.